Hey guys, today I want to talk about one of the biggest mistakes I made early in my career that cost me jobs. High profile, good paying jobs. And talk you through a concept that will help you not make the same mistakes that I did. So let's dig into it. Think of your career kind of like a chain link, where each link in the chain represents a different skill in your bag of skill sets. As a cinematographer or a crew member, producer, pretty much anyone on a filmmaking team, your job is to help a director or client get their vision to a finished product. So here we have two poles that represent the gap between these two things, right? Director's vision, finished product. And as a filmmaker, your job is to help the director or client bridge that gap. And how do we do that? We do that with the skill sets in our toolbox. So using documentary cinematography as an example, here are some of the skills that almost every doc cinematographer needs. The first is to shoot solid verite, shooting in-scene action, observational filmmaking. And then obviously capturing great B-roll, which you can use during an interview or for a voiceover, always important. The ability to capture a place in unique and interesting ways. And then, because documentaries are usually pressed for time and money, being very resourceful. And then finally, the ability to shoot great cinematic looking interviews. For the first few years of my career, my chain link looked a little bit like this. If there was a director or a film that needed certain skill sets to get over to finished product, if it was about verite filmmaking, I could clip that on to help bridge that gap and get ourselves a little bit further along the way. And I was pretty adept at capturing B-roll. I spent a lot of my early career traveling the world shooting a short documentary every week, and so I was pretty strong at doing this skill. And then, because of that travel documentary and because I focus a lot of my work on the region of Appalachia, I am adept at showcasing a place in an interesting and unique way, so I could add that to my skill set, I think. And finally, because I often worked as a one-man band or with a crew of just 2, maybe 3 people, I was pretty resourceful as well. So any film that required this specific set of skills, I was able to bridge that gap and go from a director's vision to a finished product and help make that possible with the skills that I had at my disposal. So for example, 2 of the first big projects I worked on were the films my wife and I made for Netflix, and they were almost 100% verite with a little bit of B-roll and voiceover, and these links were quite strong. You know, to showcase a place, being resourceful was just the 2 of us on every shoot, and so we were able to bridge that gap with these skill sets. And I was feeling pretty good about myself when I had this skill set in place. At this point in my career, I had shot quite a few verite films for some of the biggest brands in the world and also some of the biggest publishers, including Netflix, PBS, New York Times. People started calling me and seeing if I could shoot their documentaries or their doc series. And so I was like, oh, you like the way I shoot verite and do great B-roll? No, thank you so much, I appreciate it. And then in every email, the dreaded line, could you send us some screenshots of your interview setups? We're gonna be doing tons of interviews for this particular project. One of the reasons these emails made me so apprehensive was because instead of having a link that looked like this for my cinematic interviews, strong and secure, mine looked more like this. A little toilet paper rolled up as a twisty tie. And so as you can imagine, when you put this into the link from vision to finished product, and your link is that weak, then you know what eventually will happen. And that cost me jobs. Where did I go so wrong? Well, today I want to talk about a few of the mindsets I had that made me make this mistake and how you can avoid them. Now, throughout the time I lost a few great potential jobs because of lack of interviews, I was still getting plenty of work in branded content and verite-heavy films. But I started doing some reflection on why did I have this gap in my skill set, and why wasn't I rectifying it? I mean, I had done interview setups before, sure, but always in a throwaway, nice to have, probably won't use this type of way. And I began to wonder why this was. First, it was true that I didn't have an immediate need in much of my work to be able to set up cinematic interviews that would play a large role in a film. As I mentioned before, the 2 films we sold to Netflix, Heroin and Recovery Boys, were almost 100% observational. While we did interviews for the films, we didn't pay particular care to how they looked and thought that if we used them, it would only be for the audio at key moments. And even then, they were used for less than a few minutes across both films. The saying that you'll figure something out when there's no alternative rings true here. If you don't know how to hunt for food, but find yourself alone and hungry in the wilderness, then you're going to try really hard to kill something and eat it. But since we were so hyper-focused on shooting all observational films and the buyers seemed to like it at the time, then why would I spend valuable time learning a complex skill like lighting and mastering interview setups? I figured it was just something I could learn later on in my career. But later on came, and it cost me work. Relatedly, there was some personal arrogance in there as well, I must admit. While I do think that the highest form of documentary filmmaking is in-scene action, cinema verite, I was definitely too arrogant in placing this form of filmmaking on a pedestal. I was a purist in a lot of ways when I first started working in features and series. We never directed subjects or had them repeat actions. We were trying to never do interviews and giggling at films that had narrators and balking at the use of slow motion in films. But with more experience and time shooting a wide variety of films, you start to gain some wisdom. You realize that there are different types of stories, and each story requires its own unique approach. My wife Elaine made a magical realism documentary called King Cole and took the concept of a narrated documentary to new and uncharted territories. And my feature directorial debut, Country Brawlers, used quite a bit of voiceover and slow motion, though neither film used a single interview shot. And films I have shot that recounted past pain and trauma needed interviews to reflect on the past and to support archival material and animation. In a chain, you are only as strong as your weakest link, no matter how strong your other links may be. I focused so strongly on shooting great verite that I over-invested time here. In the grand scheme of my skill sets, this link was already strong, large, and pretty heavy. But with my interview setup so weak, it didn't matter how strong I made that link or any of the other skill sets to beef that one up. Producers, directors, and clients could tell that those links were strong, but that's not what they needed or wanted. All they saw was a small, weak link that could potentially break the chain they needed to get from vision to product. Finally, the last reason I realized I continued to make this mistake is the reason I made this video in the first place. I found interview setups to be intimidating. What lights should I use? Where do I put them? What makes interviews look great? What diffusion should I use? Where should the lights be placed in relation to the interviewer and interviewee? I found it all very confusing. But I decided to strengthen that link in my chain. And how did I do this? I did a deep dive on interviews and really studied how they were done, while also going out on my own to try a wide variety of different interview setups in tons of different locations. I watched films, I scoured YouTube, I bought different types of lights, and I tried them out in different locations. I started production designing the backgrounds and rooms of my interviews. I spent years doing this, studying up hundreds of interviews and studying dozens and dozens of films. The result is a framework I made for myself called the 10 Steps to Cinematic Interviews. I take this list with me on every shoot. It is a framework and guide on how to make great looking interviews every single time, no matter the location or time allotted. And now I'm excited to announce that I took this framework and I made my first ever online course, which just launched this week. And for all my YouTube viewers here, I'm offering a 25% off launch price to access this to the point but thorough course on how to make cinematic looking interviews every time you set out to do so. So click the link in the description below to check out that course. And also, if you'd like, sign up for a one-on-one consultation and interview critique by yours truly, and I'll see you over there. All right, so now back here at our links, you'll notice that with my newfound interview skills, my chain is now strong to get from director's vision to finished product in any job that requires this set of skills. Now, as you advance in your skill set and get bigger and bigger jobs, this gap will widen and widen, and therefore you need to keep adding different skill sets to your link in order to continue to bridge that gap. But no matter how wide the gap between vision and product becomes, as long as you keep adding skill sets, as long as you keep learning, you'll be able to bridge that gap with your strong set of chain link skills. So if, like me, interviews were a weak part in your link, then check out the 10 steps to cinematic interviews in the link below, 25% off for all the month of November, and I'll see you there.